line with us, Eric Boehlert, the founder and editor of PressRun.Media. Also, Eric Boehlert, B-O-E-H-L-E-R-T, over on Twitter. Eric, welcome back to the program. Your newsletter, Stop Whitewashing GOP's Putin Worship, really hit me when I subscribed to your newsletter. It's absolutely great at PressRun.Media, and I encourage everybody listening to do the same. Tell me about this turning point for the Republican Party that you're talking about, and I think more importantly, since your beat is the media or media overview, how our quote, mainstream media is just absolutely failing to describe what is actually going on.
Well, I think it's a 1-2 combo in that the press for years hasn't known what to make of this radical and dangerous Republican Party, right? The media is married to this idea that the Republican Party is a center-right entity, and it mirrors the opposite of the center-left Democrats, and that's how American politics works. And Republican Party is filled with honorable men and women who are doing the best they can. And that does not describe anything remotely similar to what the Republican Party is today. If anyone watched 5 minutes of CPAC over the weekend, they would understand the insanity that has been let loose. And so specifically with the Putin and Ukraine and Russia, there was major portions of the Republican Party running up to the invasion that were basically pledging their admiration, if not their allegiance, to the Kremlin instead of the White House. That is unprecedented. Yeah. And it was being led by the leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump. And, it was, I did see an interesting quote from a Colombian historian who told the New York Times, this would be like if Eisenhower had cheered the invasion of Czechoslovakia. I mean, it's incomprehensible. So what does the press do with that when the Republican Party and Trump acts in incomprehensible ways? Their knee-jerk reaction is to just kind of normalize it, pretend it's not that big a deal. A quick example over the weekend, New York Times had headlines something like, Trump praises Putin, puts Republicans in a bind. It's some minor inter-party squabble. It's not a big deal that the leader of the Republican Party is basically pledging his allegiance to a foreign power that's invading its neighbor. I'm sorry, it's not a minor passing event. It is. It should be a defining moment for the Republican Party. Yeah. And as I followed up today on Press Run, there's absolutely no political coverage about what this all means for the Republican Party in the midterm elections this year. 85% of Americans have an unfavorable view of Russia right now, according to the new Gallup poll. That's the lowest rating in 3 decades. That, to me, and anyone else who follows politics, means the Republican Party has dug itself a hole, a political hole, an electoral hole for the midterms. But there's virtually no conversation about how this might play out for the Republican Party and if it might be a bad thing for the Republican Party. But, the press is absolutely obsessed with covering the midterms because they think the Democrats are going to do really badly. Well, so that's a big story for them.
Just consider how the press would be covering the midterm races, the Republican versus Democrat races, coming up in a few months. How they would be covering it if Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders had both just come out and said, we really think that Cuba is the role model for the United States. And we really need to, respect everything that they're doing. I mean, I'm not talking about just removing sanctions to try to make Cuba more democratic. Frankly, that's my position, that the sanctions haven't worked with Cuba and that we should do something different, which, by the way, was Obama's position as well. Right. But, they would be going nuts. They'd be going, how can the Democrats survive this? The Democrats just embraced, Cuba. Oh, my God, But Republicans embracing Putin. I mean, here's another startling one. I don't know if you caught this yet, Eric. It just popped up on Raw Story about 10 minutes ago. New Yahoo News YouGov poll, which notes that 76% of Americans hold a negative view of Putin. But among Trump voters, 47% of Trump voters say Putin is doing a better job than Biden. And only 3% of Trump voters give Biden any credit for doing a better job. On the topic of strength, 73% of Trump voters found Putin is stronger than Biden.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
what the hell does this tell us about America's media and about what, how Americans are being informed?
Yeah. Well, this Putin romance started under Obama, right? They used Putin, when he invaded Crimea. Oh, he's so strong. Obama's
the Republican romance.
Yeah. And Obama rides his bike with a bicycle and Putin's invading countries. And why can't, the American president be virile and strong like the Russian dictator? So they've had this soft spot for Putin. And this is supposed to be the Republican Party, which defined the evil empire of Russia and the Soviet Union, that supposedly stands for freedom and liberty. I mean, Putin is just this despot. His political opponents end up dead or in jail or poisoned. I mean, this is, your Cuba analogy is a good one, but it doesn't even go far enough. I mean, there are very few countries on the planet that operate politically like Russia in terms of just brutal suppression on that large of a scale. The comparison I've been using for the last few days, in terms of this cheerleading for Russia and what the media reaction would be on the other side. Imagine if after, Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, if a third of the Democratic Party said, we support Saddam Hussein, we wish George H.W. Bush was a leader like Saddam. I mean, my God, could you imagine? Yeah. It would have been, the press just would have written off the Democratic Party as a political entity for the next 10 years. I mean, it would have been suicide. But here we are, again, over CPAC, we had Trump praising Putin. You had lots of others, crazies getting up and saying things like that. But your point about the poll is so revealing. This is, these Trump supporters, are just completely blind in terms of their hatred of the Democratic Party, in terms of Joe Biden. And it's really amazing when you take a step back. I mean, Joe Biden is basically this very traditional center-left Democrat. And Trump and Fox News have tried to turn him into this, I don't even know.
Radical leftist.
This borderline communist. I don't know what they're trying to turn him into. Yeah. And he reminds most normal people of their uncle or their grandfather. Not a particularly scary political entity. Yeah. But look, they've locked themselves into this bubble. Tucker Carlson tells them there's no reason not to support Vladimir Putin. Tucker Carlson tells them Ukraine isn't worth fighting for. It's a sham country. Everyone there is part of this, corrupt Hunter Biden machine. And these are the real world effects. Never in 100 years would have thought that the former Soviet empire invading another country would be cheered by basically the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party. But here we are. Yeah, and my point is the press normalizes all of this. The press kind of shrugs its shoulders, and the press is just, committed to this Trump being Trump. And what are you going to do?
I totally get this. We're talking with Eric Boehlert, one of the great observers of media in the United States and around the world. PressRun.Media is his website. Eric Boehlert, Boehlert, over on Twitter. Eric, we're going to hit a break here in a minute or two, but I'm wondering your thoughts on this sudden shift we've been watching on Fox. I think a lot of what we're talking about tracks back. Some of it obviously, and maybe even much of it tracks back to the radicalization from Russian bots on Facebook to Trump to wackadoodle media like Newsmax, but an awful lot of it goes back to Fox News. And Fox News in the last 48 hours has gone from saying, hey, what's the big deal? You should just let Putin have Ukraine. They've gone from that being more or less their official position, certainly the position of their primetime hosts, to time to kill Putin. I mean, they're actually calling for his execution. I was over the weekend, and I was just astonished at how 180-degree different. I mean, talk about whiplash. How is this going to go down with Fox News viewers? What do you think the impact of this is going to be on their audience and frankly on their hosts? I mean, how does Tucker Carlson deal with this?
We always wonder, but in the end, there are no rules over there. Their viewers don't care. There's no need for consistency within 24, 48 hours. In even an issue of war, in an invasion, you can go Tucker Carlson saying, this is not our fight, Ukraine isn't worth defending, to, death to Vladimir Putin. So it gives you all kinds of leeway because you're never held accountable by anyone or anything. Your viewers aren't going to say boo. And yes, the rest of us are going to look and shake our heads and say, "Oh my God, what's going on over there?" But internally, they just gaslight. It's very similar to the Kremlin. The Kremlin under Putin for 20 years has just been a stream of contradictions and lies to the point where you don't really know what's up or down, and that's what Fox News is doing. But to answer your question, it doesn't matter because there are no rules and nobody holds them responsible for anything.
Remarkable. Check out Eric's newsletter over at PressRun.Media. Eric Boehlert, the founder and editor of PressRun.Media. Eric, thanks a lot for dropping by. Great talking to you.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Okay.